free every episode we cast. Real talk, real tools, wisdom on the fly. Tune in, geek out, reach for the sky. FPK, Future Proof Knowledge Podcast.
And hello and welcome everybody. This is Jay Sean Mills with the Future Proof Knowledge Podcast Show, and we've got Mr. Allen. Look at him driving in his car, trying to get to his spot on time, but he's late. And we have our ever so popular Miss Olive Hickmott in the house today. So welcome to the Future Proof Knowledge Podcast Show. Today is episode number... What episode number are we on there? Episode 48. Holy cow, we have been doing some podcast. I'm telling you, 48. Two more and we'll be as many episodes as I am years old. Today we are going to be discussing finding your authentic self in a world full of expectations. Damn, Alan, that's a pretty deep one there. I don't know why you do this to us. I don't even know how to begin on that one. So what we'll do is, let's see. Yeah.
The idea, I was brought the idea. So all of it, why got the idea?
Excellent. So Olive, are we living in the life we choose or the one we're told to live? How did you come up with this topic? And let's dive in.
Discussing various things, and I just said, well, let's pick a topic that we've been talking about. And the topic was...
Your husband in his shorts just passed by in the background.
Oh, God.
You never know what you're going to get on that podcast.
We're going to have to change the rating on this one.
All right, okay. And so that you've completely confused me now. The topic was why do kids go along a path in school and further develop it as they get into being teenagers and adults, and is it the path they choose or is it the path they've been pushed into? And I see a lot of conflict going on in young children because the young children really want to do something different than what they are being led into doing. And of course, if they're really young, they may not have a clear view of what they want to do in life. I don't expect that. But when you've got, I was talking to some child recently, and I said, you know, what books are you reading in school? And he can read. And he said, oh, they're really boring. And I said, well, what are you really interested in? He went, dinosaurs and World War II and stuff like that. And he said, and I said, so aren't you allowed to read those? And he went, no, I've got to read the standard ones. And I think it starts really that young of actually what we believe is the right things to be teaching our children, and it might have no relationship with what they end up doing. So that's one end of the scale. And I'll give you another end of the scale is that quite often people in life change what they want to do, you know, around the age of 40, make a complete change in what they're doing. And you often, I did that. I mean, I was a software engineer for 40 odd years. And then I started doing the work I did on literacy, which was nothing like I'd done before. And all because I had a challenge with literacy. And I saw other kids who got a challenge, so I thought we can help them as well. So I did a complete change around the age of 40-ish, something like that. And I was just discussing with Alan how many kids actually grow up and do what they want to do, and at the end of the day, they will say, "That's what I wanted to do." So that's where I'd start, Joshua. Views?
Interesting. Well, I know I'm not doing what I wanted to do as a kid. As a kid, I always wanted to be a teacher, and I'm obviously not a teacher. But I find throughout my career in multiple different jobs, I always end up in a teaching position in the jobs I've had. I'm not a teacher, but building boats. I always learned better when I was teaching people
Yeah.
what I was doing. So anytime there was new hires and stuff, I'd always absorb them into my world so I can teach them and perfect my craft. Um, so I totally get that. Yeah, most people aren't doing what they wanted to do as children, but that's interesting because that's a very good point. And that's something that FPK University is trying to address. So you mentioned a child in school. You ask them, well, what do you like? I like dinosaurs and I like World War II. And the way I see the school systems are structured right now is that's not going on in line with their general curriculum. There may be a section of curriculum on those particular likes, but wouldn't it be great if we can use those two likes for that individual student and apply it to all of the topics and subjects that student likes so they can further develop that interest into their personal likes and turn that into a career.
Yeah, I'll tell you the story of the one of the very first children that I worked with. He was in special needs school, and he had no literacy at all. It was a secondary school, so he must have been about 12. And he was sitting at the front of the class, and he got his hands like this around bits of plastic that he was tearing up and dropping in between his hands. And I said to it, and I didn't know he was really non-verbal. And I said to him, "What are you doing there?" And he looks at me and goes, he looks at the, and I went, "Oh," I looked at what he was doing. And I said, "That's a dinosaur, isn't it?" And he was just tearing up bits of plastic to make a dinosaur. And he nods. And so I said, "Why have you got your hands there?" And he looks at me as much to say, "This woman's an idiot." And then he pointed to the open window, and I went, "Oh, if you move your hands, then all the bits of plastic will move." Okay, I've got that. And so the next thing we did was that I was trying to teach him literacy. And so one of the things I do is to get children to superimpose words on objects. So I said to him, "There's a grass bank out there. Can you get your dinosaur up in the air? Because I don't like them looking down because that gets them into their emotions, which might be negative." Anyway, so he got his dinosaur up on the grass bank, and I showed him how to spell T-Rex, and said, "Now put that on the dinosaur, and see if you can spell T-Rex for me." And no word of a lie, I got T-Rex wrong. It was the wrong dinosaur. He spelt Tyrannosaurus. And this child had not spelt anything in school since the beginning of the year, and they were now about 7 months into the year. And he just came out with this, and I was just absolutely dumbfounded. And I spoke to his teacher wasn't in that day. They got a supply teacher in. I spoke to his teacher the next week, and I told her what had happened. And she said, if I'd been here, I'd have said, don't mention dinosaurs, because that's the only thing he's interested in. And my attitude is completely the opposite. Talk to them about what they're interested in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, certainly, it's better.
whenever I was young person, my view is always I have to prove to them that I'm trustworthy. They don't have to prove to me that they're trustworthy. And as part of that process, I would always go, what are you interested in? Like that. They might say, I'm into makeup, I'm into baking, sport. My response was always, oh, well, I love that sport. I love that activity. Or, I've always wanted to learn about that activity. Let's do it together. And it goes right back to that kind of drivers that I discussed in the past, where the belief system that we take on about ourselves is seven. Young people don't have a try hard drive. Tell you how hard they're trying and tell you how hard they're trying. I think that's true. But they're also, when they're into something, they will persevere with it. Well beyond when they will stop, but they will stay with it. And then they will also, if you tell them what to do, they'll go, oh, really? Just because you tell me to do it, I'm not going to go and do it. And how you get around that is using the we. Come on, we will do this together. You're not demanding from them, you're asking for them to make a change. That was the philosophy I always took with the young people that I was working with was, right, if you want to learn about makeup, let's go and do it. It was like photographs knocking around with me with amazing nails, with like full face paint done, full like fantastic eyeshadow and a whole lot. But what that does is that teaches the young person that what they're interested in and them as human beings have worth and value. And all of a sudden, once you get that person on side, then you can introduce more challenging conversations you need to have because they trust you straight away. And yet, if we look at saying all of that, people saying, I would never have spoken about dinosaurs, you're actually shutting down that opportunity to build a relationship with somebody that you could meet them in the future that they talk about in 20 years' time and go, they were the teachers who actually did it. They were the ones that made learning interesting. They were the ones that made me believe that I had worth and value and I could actually learn. That is such a profound impact and such a simple time in a young person's life. Right, I'm going to mute again.
Very good point you got there, Alan, and thank you for muting again. Not that we don't like to hear you talk, but you are a little patchy there. So one of the interest things around this topic is, how do you think family, culture, education, technology like social media, and things of that nature, how does that help shape the identity of that child, or individuals when we're looking at our likes and our interests, and how does that affect what we may end up doing in the future as adults and whatnot? The reason why I ask, so especially leaning into the culture side, lots of people will want to be something because it's culturally relevant to them, or it's what their families does, it's what their parents do. So you'll often hear kids say, "Oh, I want to be a nurse like my mom," or "I want to do this like my dad." Um, that's fantastic, but how do we get them to explore their own interests and not to just follow it because it's culturally relevant or because it's what social media is showing us? Because I mean, today a lot of kids want to be influencers because that's what they see on social media. Um, so how do we get them to shape their own identity outside of those influences around them?
With difficulty. One of the things I think is that, I mean, I deal a lot with neurodiverse kids, and don't forget with that they may be quite different to their parents, and I think it's a parent's job to point out to the children that they might be different in a really good way, and they may have completely different opportunities because they're they're 30 years, 20 years, 30 years further back, and so opportunities were really different. And just saying, oh, well, I'm going to be like your mum, or the mum or your dad, that might be really good, but at the same time, they may have completely not considered other opportunities. And with AI turning up, we're going to have completely different opportunities in the next decade than we've had in the previous decade. I think we just have to see them as individuals and encourage them to follow their interests. That's the way I would look at it. And and those interests are not likely to be the same throughout their life. They might well change. Gone are the days where you had a job for life.
Yeah, in my experience, I never was able to see myself or how other people stayed in a job for 30, 40 years. My dad, he stayed in a job, retired 30 years with Harris County. He worked for the county and he day in and day out, 30 years, all the way through retirement, all of his 15, 20, 25, 30-year badges and all that stuff. And I thought, well, that's amazing, but you have so many different interests. How can you go to the same job day in and day out when I know that has nothing to do with your interest? Whereas myself, I've worked in every industry. I've been in construction. I've been in cable installation. I've built boats. I've worked in fast food and retail. I've tried just about every job out there. And one of the things that I find exciting for myself is I love to learn new things. So I would find it hard to stay in one career for a long time. I got into upholstery. It took me a couple years to get really good at it. Got really good. I built a business around it. But then my interest changed, and that's not as fun anymore because I learned the craft and I mastered the craft and I got really good. So rather than spending more time in something I've mastered, my brain says I need to find something different, learn a new skill, and then go all in on trying to learn this new skill, and everything else doesn't matter because I've already mastered that. So my lifelong career has been a road of multiple changes. I do one job, I like it, I enjoy it. Then that day comes where I've got it, I understand it. It's no longer challenging. What's beyond the next door? And I think that's something that historically, our parents and our parents' parents would never have encouraged that. It was always, nope, you get a job and you go to work every single day. I don't care if you don't like the job. You go to that job every single day, you put a roof over your head, you build a house, and there's all these finite goals that you had that was independent of your happiness. It was, this is what you have to do. These days, I think parents are a lot more open and a lot more, they see the changes. And even when I was going to school, I could never really force myself to go to a university. But I found that a trade school was more up my alley because I can go in and I can learn about a specific trade without all the other things that I didn't care about, but I can focus on that trade. So I went to ITT Technical Institute. It was for electronics. I was interested in electronics. I didn't have to learn about geography and all these other subjects. I got to learn about that focused topic. So I think society has changed enough to where parents understand that. But the thing that we need to help parents understand is the visual. We need to visualize. We need to focus on our kids and see what their interests are. And in many cases, we need to steer them away from following in our footsteps. If you have a child that you just know, this kid is just, I mean, he's good with his hand, he's tactile, he's a good thinker, problem solver, he'll be really good at building or construction or some type of mechanics. But they tell you, I want to be a tax accountant like you, mom. And they're not the best with numbers all from their school school tests and things like that. It's nice to know that your child wants to do what you do, but if you know they have a skill that's better, I would rather my mom or my parent tell me, you know what? I appreciate that you want to do what I do, but you are so much better at doing this that you can be more successful than I've ever been doing at what I'm doing. So to push that encouragement to break that chain and to explore more options. Um, have you ever ran into any of those situations where you had to steer somebody away from what they thought they wanted to do because you saw something different in them that they didn't see in themselves?
Well, for my own kids, I did actually. I think I really abdicated. I let them do whatever they were inspired to do. There was a lad in our village though recently who I did work with, and he for literacy, and he got really fantastic. And I said to him, I asked them when I first met them what they enjoyed doing, and one of the things they enjoyed doing was, she said, he's the best problem solver in the house. She said, this was mum. Mum said, if ever I've got a problem, I just ask him to solve it and he'll go away and solve it. And another thing he did was that we have here a cycle ride to go to school. If they're not going on the school bus, they can actually bike. Sort of, it's not across the fields, it's on an old railway track. And this lad set up a mini business to fix people's bikes who got stuck on the track over to school. So he went every day with his little bicycle repair kit and a bicycle pump and a few other bits and pieces. So if anybody broke down, he helped them. I just thought that was magic.
That's exceptional. Absolutely.
So it's just doing what you get some fun out of doing, I think. And
Absolutely. So, what are some ways you think parents and educators and even communities can create environments where individuality is celebrated?
I think there's a lot to be said about just observation, just really watching your kid and noticing what they are good at. It's like the story I told you about the dinosaurs. That I knew he was really enthusiastic about dinosaurs, and so that was the path I went down. And I think if you just observe keenly what they're interested in, you will see it. And
Absolutely.
and I think also you can't. I think there's been an expectation that you have a job for life, but that's dying out. And I think it's parents' job to really get kids to realise that is, they are likely to have career changes. Lots of people do, and that they follow whatever's really interesting to them, and see where it leads them to.
And part of that is society has always kind of made it a stigma when they discuss people who go from jobs to jobs, like, this person just can't hold a job. They can't hold down the job.
Yeah.
I've been accused of that. My mom used to say, you just need to keep a job. You just need to keep a job. And it was like, it wasn't a matter that I got fired from jobs. That was never the case. It was just exactly as I explained. My interest changed. So I want to work in something I'm interested in. So I think from a societal standpoint, even parental standpoint, I think breaking that stigma, I do believe somebody should have a job for life. I don't believe they should have one job for life. And I think it should be maybe taught. It should be a subject in school, maybe not in your early years in school, but maybe once you get into heading into graduation or one of your first college classes, if that's the direction you need to go. But I think it needs to be done within the high school years at some point. But something that kind of teaches those who have multiple interests, it's okay to get a job. But here's a way to do it. Set yourself a goal. If it's a new interest or you're getting a job for that new interest, set yourself a goal. What what is mastery of this interest to you in your mind? And write that down. Now work that job until you feel like you've hit that mastery. What's the proper way to leave a job and move into a new job? How do you transition careers? And I think career transition is something that is very undertaught in schools because of the societal thinking of you get a job, you stick with that job for life. We're no longer doing that. So I think schools need to teach a new way of get a job, do it till as long as you want to, don't feel trapped. But if you ever decide to transition, here's a appropriate way to transition from that won't set you back, won't put you into a hole, but there is a right way to transition. I know there's a right way because I've transitioned probably into 50 different jobs over my lifetime. And I've done it the wrong way, and now I know the right way. The wrong way is just don't show up at work one morning. And then you're scrambling looking for that job that you're interested in. Then you're a month or two behind on your bills. Now you're struggling and you're doing anything you have to do just to get the bills paid. That's a problem. But if you plan on that transition, and if there was things that were taught to me when I was in school on how to plan on transitions, then a lot of those headaches that I ran into in the past as a younger man, I wouldn't have had to deal with. So Alan, now that you're back with us in the hot seat here, what's some of your input you have on this topic we're discussing?
So I think you're absolutely right in terms of transition. So there's a lot of things that would be a lot more beneficial for students to learn in school that are practical applications in the real world when they leave school versus some of the other things that they would learn that they will never utilize or use or have no interest in whatsoever. So I do think things like transitioning, but I suppose if we look at the structure of the traditional education system that a lot of young people will work through, it is very much a linear approach. So you go through school, you pass each year, you take exams, you pass those exams, you finish school, you go to university. Now it's you get a degree and then do a master's degree because that's the minimum requirement now. And then you'll get a job. And as you say, you will stay in that job or that career until you retire. Right? And we know life is 100% not linear. It's just not. But we live in a very scientific world now where it's like A plus B has to equal to C. Whereas if we were to introduce opportunities for students, no matter what stage they're at, and what, one of the conversations myself and Olive were having yesterday when we were discussing this topic was people say, like, if you've got an interest in something, work at that and then you will never work a day in your life. Absolute rubbish.
Yeah.
You're going to work, right? But there's almost an implicit element there, which is if you pick something that you like. So if you pick dinosaurs, you have to work with dinosaurs as your only mechanism. That's it, because you chose it. And kids change their mind. And guess what?
And the world changes around them.
Absolutely. And we've all, like every single one of us right now, are in a career that we didn't start out in. And I could, the majority of people I know are probably in careers that they didn't start out in. Because that's actually real life. You try things, you like it for a while, like you said, Jay Sean, and then you don't like it as much anymore. And it's almost like, yeah, well, you picked this path, so you have to stay on it. And people feel trapped, not by anybody externally necessarily saying that to them, but it's the structure and the system that is telling them that, well, you obviously picked the wrong one. But no, maybe it was the right one at that moment, but you can change your mind. And I think that's the same for learning. So if, and this is why I love the potential that AI has, where if a teacher were to go and say, right, Jason, I'm going to teach you maths, and you're telling me that you love dinosaurs, so I'm going to go away and I'm going to prepare all these materials for you to learn about math through dinosaurs. And then 3 months in, Jason, you're like, yeah, I'm not too keen on dinosaurs anymore. I love Avengers now. And the teacher's like, no, I created all these materials so you're learning about dinosaurs. Whereas with the opportunities that AI is giving us and will be giving us in the future, that's okay. You'll be able to change the mechanism by which you experience the information in a so much more easier, smooth way that you could change your mind tomorrow if you want. And I think that's one of the big things about why I personally moved into this direction. Because seeing the potential coming down the road of what technology can bring to change the outcomes for those individuals who usually struggle in school. Now, it's not saying that technology is the only way, but it provides an opportunity for those educators to support learning in different ways, which is absolutely phenomenal.
I even think that looking at the way our school system is structured, you go K through 12 with the push as soon as you graduate, you go to a community college or a university and you start studying what it is you think you like. Spend all that money, you get a degree, then you finally get to do that job you think you like. You get to actually be a practitioner of it. I think that's so backwards. I think the K through 12 is great. It prepares you with the well-rounded options of things you might like and the basics of education so you can navigate the world. But I think there should be a 2-year gap between high school and any college or further education, unless you're absolutely sure that you already know. If you're not allowed to work in different jobs, if you don't have the time or the resources to work in different jobs in your senior years in high school, I think you should have a 2-year gap of where you're exploring. And I think more businesses need to have openings for job explorers, people that I don't know if I want to work for your company. I don't know if this is the type of work that I want to do. Can I come in and work as an explorer, seeing if this is something I like? And I think if people had that opportunity to bounce around from several job type explorer programs and then be like, oh, this is this particular job, this is what I'm liking. I enjoy this. Now I can go further my education, possibly stay on with the company on a part-time basis while they help me go to school. And now I'm learning something that I've trialed, I've tested, and this is what I want to do. Now parents aren't wasting $120,000, $250,000, $300,000 for a degree that a student gets their job and says, I don't want this. I'm going to go do something totally different. And that $300 you paid for me, parents, thank you, but it all went to waste because I'm not doing anything that was paid for. That goes into the debt families take on. So, I mean, there's a whole lot of things systematically that can be fixed and changed if we just change the general thinking of you have to go from high school to college to your career. Maybe high school, explore, trade school, focused on what you find out you like, and then move into your career. And that leaves people agile enough to be able to bounce around throughout their lifetime and adapt.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like Oliver, we've discussed your career path and your journey. Like, and like I love it. Like it makes it's an it's a real life experience, is what I'd say for a lot of people. But I'm curious, like what, like I know you said you wanted to deal with or try and figure out ways to help yourself, but did you have a very definite point where you went, I no longer want to do, and maybe you guys discussed this when I had dropped off the call, where you went, I don't want to do software engineering anymore?
Oh no, I had that decision taken out of my remit because from the day I left university when I was doing I got a maths degree um, until I then fell into a local company which I didn't do any planning to join at all, and discovered it was the really early stages of creating IT applications. So I joined a company which instantly split into five, and there was people doing IT for trains. There was people doing IT for planes. There was people, and I was doing IT for blood analysis in hospital laboratories. And so it was at that sort of time that everything was certainly in that company, everybody was looking at what applications what can use IT that haven't been using it before. You know, blood analysis was done by charts on the wall, and you took samples of people's blood, and these poor people in the labs had to work out these really complicated um, uh, calculations when when your blood went in for analysis. And so I was absolutely convinced I was really happy in applications. And then I somehow, by some fluke, I think, landed in designing the internet for my sins. And so we implemented internet boxes of one description or another in the early days of before the internet, when it was all point to point stuff, but remote. And then I worked my way up through the company, became a company director of the research and development department, and then I got made redundant. And so I went, right, okay, what am I going to do now? And that was the first time I'd ever thought of what I was going to do next. And so I stumbled into doing some contract work with helping people bring new products to market, because that's what I've been doing all my life. And so, and then eventually did a training course in what's called neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. And I discovered literally in 10 minutes why I could never spell and read very well. And so I just went, hang on a minute. And over tea, I was asking people whether they could do this, and they said, yeah, if they were good at spelling and reading. And the people who weren't were going, no, I can't do this either. So I then launched my career into going into the local special needs school that I mentioned earlier, and going, how can we teach this to these kids who have got no literacy at the age of 12? And so I was forcibly changed career, but the minute I started doing it, it was like, I'm staying here. If I can make a business out of this and help a load of kids along the way, that's all I want to do. And so that's what I've been doing.
But isn't that fascinating, the way, probably, I'm sure when you were made redundant, it was, scary times. Like when anyone gets laid off, it's like, Jesus, what's going to happen next? Because we don't know what the future holds. But it's amazing how often something like that can be the catalyst for actually moving into the space that you were meant to be in inverted commas.
The Yeah, and I had it was a time when it was a recession. It was back in 1990, and lots of people were being made redundant. And I got some friends who were also being made redundant, and we were, hatching plots as to what to do next. And I was very happy to take whatever job I could find as a temporary job, and it all worked out in the end. And as I say, I got my training for what I do now in 15 minutes on a training course, and I just went, I'm going to work out how to do this, and so that's what I do.
Wasn't that there is the neurodiverse brain in action? I'm going to work out how to do this.
Well, it was just a demonstration, you see. The people were on the stage, and you could see that the people who are good at literacy would look up in order to spell words that were difficult, and the people who were not good at literacy would look at the floor and feel embarrassed. And I went, okay, so it works. I can't do what I'm observing, and so how am I going to teach it to other people? But I luckily knew some people in special needs school, and so I asked if I could have some of their students to try it out.
That's amazing. Like, Jason, if 25-year-old Jason was seeing you now, what would he make of where things have gone for you?
25-year-old me would probably just smile and be like, yep, he's right where he should be. No, I mean, every change of career, every change of job, every change of interest, I've acted on. And I've had some hard times in some of those choices. Some of those choices didn't make the money I thought I could make doing them. And I've slept in my van for quite a bit of time. I mean, couch surfed, all based off from different job decisions I made. And no, I think a 25-year-old me was looking at me right now. I don't know. I guess I'd probably be surprised that I'm not doing, well, I am. So maybe not surprised. I was going to say not doing physical labor type work, but this is only just one of the many things I do here with FPK. So I do still do physical type stuff. But no, I mean, I think he'd be proud of me for still doing what I want and not because other people want me to do it. I always, I'm going to do what I enjoy. I'm not going to work places because it's the societal norm. I mean, I've done jobs that people were like, oh, that's horrible. Why would you do that type of job? It's like awful. I mean, you look at a lot of people who have jobs that some would think are crappy jobs. Let's say sanitizer, somebody who cleans out porta potties. I know somebody who owns a porta potty company, and he's absolutely he loves his job every day. And it's a bad, smelly job, but what he gets out of it is what a lot of people don't get out of their job. He gets to show up at a location, see something that smells dirty, misused. He gets to do something to it and step back and see the fruits of his labor. He gets to see it's clean, it's good. People, oh, thank you for doing that. Thank you for doing that. So to some, they might think, oh, the garbage man, that's just a garbage man. That's a crappy job. But if you love your job and it's what makes you happy, don't care about what other people think, lean into it. And I think that's been the way I've always done things. And yeah, 25-year-old me would be proud of that.
And if you look at the skills that people like that have put into their jobs, they are extraordinary and probably transferable to other things.
Yep.
To be able to do a really great job under duress and stand back and look at it, be really proud of it. And like yours of always learning. I mean, that is just such a valuable skill to bring to any business.
And I think a lot of businesses miss the mark because I think lots of people go into a job thinking they're going to enjoy it. Even something as simple as fast food. Oh, I like working with people. I think it'd be fun to greet people, serve people all day. There's one way you could really make that job even more enjoyable, or even like an office job. Lots of people go in, they know they have a certain task. I need to take these reports, file them, generate them, push it along, and they never get to see the fruits of their labor. They just come in the next day, there's a new stack. If companies and owners and managers would, at the end of the month, look, here's our monthly report. Based off from what you did, our business made this much money. That's a big difference than just expecting a person to come in and do a mundane job. You need people to do that, but you can make that person enjoy that job more and feel like they're contributing when you show them the end results. And too many people go to work day in and day out and they don't see the end results of their work. And I think that's what causes the burnout, by not seeing that end result.
Absolutely. It's purpose. Like
Yeah.
every human being needs purpose in their lives, and they need to have a reason to get up. And people assume that money is enough of a purpose for people. But like with coaching people, I've coached so many people who will go, I have to get out of this job. I don't like the culture. I don't like the place. I don't like the work. And then they'll go to leave, and the company that they're with are going, oh, we can't lose this person. We'll give you an extra €10,000. And all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, €10,000. We're trying to buy a house. That'll make a big difference to us. And every single time that somebody stays in the job, and I've had people who were offered like $1 million, stay for another $1 million, 6 to 8 weeks, without fail, 6 to 8 weeks, the money no longer matters because the job is still the same. The culture is still the same. The things that they didn't like about it are still the same, and the money doesn't make that any better. So when we talk, and I love this idea you're talking about, that's purposeful. This work that you've done has directly contributed to X, Y, and Z. Whatever that X, Y, and Z is, whether it's what the company have made, whether it's the amount of individuals that you helped, whether it's the outcomes that those young people or those students or whomever, staff, clients experience, and be able to acknowledge that. So what you're doing is you're showing the employees that you see them for what they are. They're not just a number that's a tick in the box. They're a human being who has a purpose, and that purpose is ultimately helping your business or the company you run or the school you run, because without them, you'd be lost.
I always like to hear those stories, and you see it on the news every now and then, where a maintenance man or a janitor for a school or a business gets an award for sticking it out 10 years and being such a great employee. And you've got people all the way up that corporate ladder above this guy, that don't understand that without him cleaning out your trash bin every day and mopping up the floor, he's keeping the business going. So it doesn't matter what position within the company a person works, they are a valuable asset, and without them, things don't get done that need to be done. So I think that goes back into, if companies learn to treat and communicate the successes that employees are contributing, and even encourage, hey, I see you've been really good at this job, but it just doesn't seem like you have it. You've lost that spark in what you're doing. Is there something else within the company that you would like to try that might bring that spark back? I think it's those type of conversations that us as business owners and even as parents need to start identifying and speaking up and remembering that all these little things all add up to how successful our child, ourselves, our friends can be in life.
That's a great final thought. So I won't even ask you for final thoughts because you just nailed it right there. Olive, have you any final thoughts for the listeners before we wrap up today's session?
I think, remember, the world is changing very fast, and whatever we did when we were back in the day in school and college and whatever it is, it's not appropriate these days to go down that model. And grandparents feel it even more, I will say. And so I think you've got to encourage your child to look at possibilities. Keep them with an open mind on what possibilities there are in the world and where they will be really excited to work.
I'm going to build on that because that's a great one. And that is what your child might choose to do or pick to do. One, you may not agree with. Two, you might know that it's a really not a great idea, but that doesn't mean you need to go in and tell them not to do it. Because we learn so much from things not working out the way we expect. So that you're not just going, don't do this because it's a really bad idea. It's like, no, do it, see how you get on, and then take the learning from it if it doesn't work out. That's so empowering. Because what you're saying to your child is, or your student or whoever, is that it's okay to try something and for it to not work out. It's okay for things to turn out to be a bit of a disaster. And it's probably not going to be the end of the world. And that's all right. So.
And I also think get them to keep an eye on what they're good at.
Yeah, absolutely.
And use it.
And use it. Well, I want to say thank you very much, Olive. And Jason, thanks for steering the ship there at the start. I was delayed in a meeting, so that's why I was stuck in the car. We will be back next week for another Future Proof Knowledge podcast, and we look forward to seeing you then.
Thanks.
FPK, Future Proof Knowledge Podcast. Mind unlocked. With every episode we cast real talk,